Welcome to another episode of the Sports Sentiment. I am your host, Nick Urias, and we are back once again talking college football. It is rivalry week between San Jose State and Fresno State. The battle for the Valley is finally here, and it will be taking place in the Central Valley at Fresno State as the Spartans and the Bulldogs will duke it out again in their annual showdown. And it is most definitely going to be a good one because we got two winning teams that will be going at it in Fresno. And we got the guy here to talk that very matchup, a guy that knows the Fresno area very well. Anything you need to know about Fresno State, Fresno athletics, anything going on in Fresno, he's your guy as he's the play-by-play voice for the Fresno A's. He broadcasts high school football in Fresno, which means he knows everything that's going on within Fresno State football. Bryan Welch. Bryan, how we doing here?
Hey, thank you so much, Nick. That's a great introduction, my friend. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. So let's talk about this rivalry game for a minute because obviously, from on the West Coast, it's such an important rivalry, I feel like, and I think nationally just doesn't get talked about a lot. I feel like, San Jose State, they haven't had too much to cheer about. They're definitely, compared to Fresno, they're definitely not on the same pedigree. Fresno, obviously, there's so much history and all the NFL talent that's came through that pipeline. But let's not mistake this rivalry. It's still a very good one. Sure, historically it's a one-sided one, but I feel like the past, I would say, half decade or so, or since they introduced the Valley Trophy, it's been dead even, 5-5. So this is ultimately the tiebreaker here. There's a whole lot of question marks as far as this rivalry with conference realignment. We could definitely dive into that. But I think regardless of the future, what we have this Saturday, October 26th in Fresno is going to be a good one.
Well, I mean, you got to look at probably the last 11 years, my friend. I mean, especially look at that 2013 game when Derek Carr and
Right.
Brighton walked right into San Jose, and then they walked out of the Silicon Valley with a loss and derailed the Bulldogs' chances of going to the BCS. I mean, this rivalry since 2013 has gone back and forth, like you said. I mean, you got to look at last year, you got to look at the 2022 season where San Jose State had some really good opportunity. They probably had a good chance to be part of the group of five to represent, to go to a bowl, probably the Fiesta Bowl. But David Perales, the young man from Merced, able to wreck the San Jose State Spartans' chances of doing that against Chevin Cordero in 2022. And you got to look at last year. I mean, it's just back and forth. I mean, it's not just football, but every sport in like the last 5 years, it's dead even between the Spartans and the Bulldogs.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the baseball last year was to the very end there, and the game seven. I mean, the basketball games last year's game for men's basketball ended in a buzzer beater. So yeah, these two programs definitely have had something going and brewing for quite some time. Let's talk about last year's matchup because, man, you talked about spoiling the party for these two, and you referred to the 2013 matchup, but you guys were ranked in the coaches poll last year. You guys were off to this red hot start. You had one of the best win streaks in all of college football going. And then you guys come to San Jose, and then it just seemed like one of those shell shocking performances. I know a lot of Fresno State fans traveled to San Jose for that one. And let's just be honest, the game was over at halftime. Like it was a 21-3 Spartan first quarter. And the way the Spartans were dominating, running the ball, doing their thing, it just seemed like Fresno State didn't have a chance. And then quarterback Mikey Keene goes out, and then that's when things really started to take a turn. And it just seemed like after that loss for the Bulldogs, the whole season was just, everything just went sideways for the Bulldogs. It's amazing what one game could do, but hey, the rivalry game holds so much significance in that case because it could really flip a team's season around. And the way these two teams are going right now, 5-2 for San Jose State, 3-1 in the Mountain West. I think it's safe to say the Spartans, from a record standpoint, are the surprise of the conference this season. And then you got Fresno State, right? They're 4-3, 2-1 in the Mountain West. They're right in the thick of things here. These two teams, like I said, they got winning records. This game determines a whole lot here for Mountain West championship stake. We got another big game between Boise State and UNLV this Friday. So it's that time of year now. Mountain West games head to head. This is when it matters most, Bryan.
Well, I mean, especially, I mean, this Bulldog squad. I mean, we go back to last year. I mean, the Bulldogs had a really good opportunity to go to the like a really good bowl game, but that San Jose State game started that 3 game skid. They lost to San Jose State, then that next week they lost to New Mexico, and they struggled against San Diego State. But the Bulldogs able to turn around in the bowl game. But this season is probably one of the most impactful seasons in the Mountain West because you have UNLV and you have Boise State. Whoever wins on Friday is in the driver's seat to go to the conference championship game in December. And the game between Fresno State and San Jose State will mean much more at 5 o'clock on Saturday because it will put the winner of that game will keep themselves in the driver's seat to go in December in the conference championship as well.
Yeah, most definitely. And no, let's just talk about how these two teams got here because San Jose State, they had so many moving parts. They have a first-year head coach in Ken Niumatalolo. And the Spartans, they've played some, let's just be honest, when we look at back at it now, some easy games on their schedule, right? The Air Force win doesn't look all so great now. Kennesaw State is still winless on the season, but they've taken care of business. They've done their thing. And we could talk about that Washington State loss. That's a common loss for the Spartans and the Bulldogs. And the Spartans have just handled their business. Yes, have things not looked the greatest here the past couple of weeks? Not at all. I think the run defense is clearly an issue. There's some other elements that we can talk about as well, that being the quarterback situation. But I feel like the skill position talent has been there and it's been a constant the entirety of the season. The run game is finally to get going. The Spartans have had 177 rushing yards last week. That's a season high with Floyd Chalk, Jabari Bates, and Lamar Radcliffe. And, Nick Nash. I mean, come on. This guy is just as advertised. 10 catches, 98 yards, a touchdown in every game this season for San Jose State. And we're finally starting to see Justin Lockhart, our wideout, 4 catches, 129 yards versus Wyoming. This Spartan offense, it's amazing because, if anyone watched that game last week versus Wyoming, you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, this game is just dreadful. Like, can we just end it already? But the Spartans had 498 total yards on offense. So, like, it's very weird, like, how the stats and all the numbers could kind of get, lost into the shuffle while you're watching with your eyes because let's just be honest, the Spartans did not look good last week in the 10-point Wyoming win. I know Wyoming backdoored a touchdown there at the end of the game, but man, the Spartans, I mean, 5-2, 3-1 in the Mountain West. It's definitely heading into the rivalry game. They got some stuff to answer here, and I think that's what makes this game, not only because the rivalry aspect, but I think just the way all the mid-season changes the Spartans have had, it just makes this game even more intriguing, Brian.
And also, I mean, you look at what happened last week against Wyoming. I mean, that slow start, you can't have that slow start for San Jose State. Also, with those 2 picks thrown by Walker Eget, kind of made that game, kind of put the game in the balance a little bit in that first half. But San Jose State being San Jose State, if Ashton Genty was not playing for Boise State, I would put Nick Nash as the Mountain West Conference Player of the Year. I would say that. Nick Nash is probably the second best player in the conference because he's been here like for 1,000 years, it seems like, it
Right?
sounds like, because he used to be the quarterback like way back in the day with Nick Starkel, and then all that. But I really believe that it's a rivalry game, and anything can happen in a rivalry game, especially for you guys, for San Jose State, and for us at Fresno State. I mean, it's gonna be good. It's always good when you see the Spartans and the Bulldogs meet up either on the football field, baseball diamond, or the basketball court.
Most definitely. And then you got Fresno State, right? They're 4-1 or 4-3, 2-1 in the Mountain West. You got wins versus Sac State, State, New Mexico, and then you had the quote unquote trap game last week at Nevada and Reno, and you guys survived that one. You guys
No, no, no,
lost it.
no, no, not trap game. Grudge match against Nevada last week.
Okay, okay. I know there was a bunch of people last week that are like, hey, keep an eye on Reno. They've been playing a little bit better, but yeah, everyone's got their own take on it. But hey, that was definitely a good win because, and I think, based on what the projection was on Reno this year and how they've looked the past couple of weeks. I mean, look, the Spartans got all they can handle versus them 3 weeks ago. So that's definitely a good win, even though Reno's record might not suggest it. And then, the losses, we can't fault you on the losses, right? At Michigan, at UNLV, at home versus Washington State. Like those are some good teams, right? So, I mean, those Fresno State, I feel like in some ways, like you guys have taken care of business. Yeah, you guys have let some games kind of, You guys have
Yeah.
thrown away some games in the fourth quarter. You guys could definitely be much better, but given the circumstances with an interim head coach, by the way, right? Tim Skipper, he came in
Correct.
like what, 2 weeks before the season started. He's like, hey, you're getting promoted. And here he is. He's commanding this thing pretty well.
Well, Tim Skipper is one. I really like talking to Tim Skipper, especially he has that positive outlook on everything, especially with the team. And the game against Nevada, it did not. It was a win, but it felt like a must win because, like 2 weeks ago against Washington State, all the missed opportunities. The Bulldogs missed two field goals, two crucial field goals in the game that could have kept the game close against Washington State. But I mean, it's been missed opportunities this season, especially against UNLV. I mean, we don't really want to talk about the train wreck at Allegiant Stadium because UNLV is a really good team this year, but the Bulldogs just gotta find their mojo. That's the thing they gotta find this week. But I mean, you gotta go back to the beginning part of the season against Michigan. I mean, Fresno State was driving down the field in the fourth quarter, but it was one play that changed the whole entire trajectory of the ball game with Will Johnson's pick six. I mean, Will Johnson's a really good defensive guy for Michigan, probably an All-American this season. But I mean, it's just been those little plays that have a great effect on what the Bulldogs have done with wins and losses. And I mean, probably Fresno State probably played their best game against New Mexico State, but that's in non-conference play. The conference portion of the schedule really matters. And I mean, you beat New Mexico, you fall to UNLV, and you beat a good Nevada squad. It was tough to get the job done, but it was the running game of Bryson Donaldson and Elijah Gilliam getting the job done. I know you talked about the running game for San Jose State having some holes like Swiss cheese in their line. The running game has to be effectively good this weekend against San Jose State.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the way this game could go in a way, right? Because these two run games have kind of came out of nowhere, right? In some sort of fashion, right? Like we know what Malik Sherrod can do, and he didn't play last week versus Nevada, and it was really just Elijah Gillum and Donaldson, like you said. I feel like could we see a potential ground and pound type of game here? I don't know because the way the Spartans have liked to aired out the ball this year, but I'm curious to get your take on this, Brian. Is Fresno State going to turn into more of this running first type offense, despite all the struggles that Mikey Keene has had? And I think at this point of the season, maybe you miss an Eric Brooks who was there for 5 years. Is that the way Fresno State's offense could operate in this one and going forward?
Don't get me wrong, the running game is really good, but there's still some good weapons on the offensive side. I mean, especially with the wide receiving core led by Magdalena. Magdalena has had a stellar year here in Fresno. I mean, he's just been a lot of fun to watch, lights out with that first play from scrimmage touchdown against Sacramento State. He's been the most consistent wide receiver we've seen so far this season. But Mikey Keene has had an up and down season so far, with a lot of some good games and some bad games. It's going to be interesting to see which Mikey Keene are we going to see this week, because Mikey Keene is a really good quarterback if you give him time to throw the ball. So that's kind of relies on the offensive line as well. If you have a good offensive line that's going to protect Mikey Keene, the Bulldogs will have a good chance of trying to pick apart the Spartans defense on Saturday. But I mean, it's just they want to go that balance. I believe Elijah Gilliam will probably get most of the touches this week along with Donaldson. That ground and pound will be key for Fresno State on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think the same for San Jose State, right? I mean, the run game has definitely been a work in progress this season. I've talked to Floyd Chalk, I've talked to Jabari Bates, and I've kind of followed up with them, every other week. Like, hey, how's the progress? How do you guys see it? And I haven't talked to them since the bye week, but I'd like to get their update now because I feel like this is kind of like right where they want it. Now, on the other side, I feel like the passing attack, as crazy as that sounds, 498 total yards last week. The passing attack has definitely been inconsistent, I think, because of the quarterback change. And I know it might not be getting a whole lot of national attention here, but this San Jose State, quarterback room has definitely been interesting. I mean, the way Emmett Brown started the season out, I mean, it was just incredible for what he was doing. A first-year starter, first career start week 1 versus Sacramento State. I mean, look, he hasn't played consistently the past 3 games because Walker Eget took the job. He's still top 5 in the Mountain West in passing yards. Like it's pretty crazy. Like the start that he had. Now things got a little rocky there in the fourth quarter versus Nevada a couple weeks ago, and that ultimately offensive coordinator Craig Stutzman, he decided to pull the plug. I think everyone in CEFCU Stadium was kind of shocked, like, whoa, maybe a little culture shock here, a little change on the fly here, especially in a 2-minute drill when you were trailing to go with Walker Eget. He rallies the troops, go gets a touchdown drive. The defense finishes it off. And in that Colorado State game, it was just so weird to watch from my television screen. Like, what's going on here? Like mid drive quarterback change. Coach Ken made a comment after the game, like, I kind of don't really want to go this route of just this two quarterback system. And don't get me wrong, like Coach Craig Stutzman, he's an offensive mastermind. He commanded that Hawaii run and shoot offense with Chevin Cordero and Cole McDonald that ended up going, doing some great things and going to a big time bowl game. But you know, I feel like with these two quarterback systems, it's very weird. Like we see SMU started a run it in week 1 versus Nevada, and that didn't work. They ultimately committed to a guy. Boise State was kind of the big headliner last year, and they had to commit to a guy, and that was due to injury. And I don't know if San Jose State's necessarily committed to Walker Eget, but I feel like that's the trajectory that it's going. I don't know. I feel like in some sense, and I agree with like Coach Ken, like you could do that if a quarterback is having a bad game. But in my professional opinion, I would like it if the Spartans just committed to a guy. It's starting to see like Walker Eget. Again, I haven't been at practice this week, but I feel like that's the direction the Spartans are going here with Walker. And if things do go a little off the rails there with Walker, maybe in the first or second quarter, maybe they do go to an Emmett Brown. I would not be shocked at all if he has 2 interceptions and the game is getting a little sideways. So I don't know. This quarterback room for the San Jose State has definitely been a wild one the past couple of weeks, but I feel like the Spartans have committed with their guy here, but at the same time, they're not afraid to pull the plug. Bryan, I know you've been monitoring the Spartans all season long. Kind of what's your take here on just that's on that Spartan QB room and who's the guy commanding it?
I mean, you look at like the two quarterback system and it actually kind of works out in the process because it keeps defenses on their toes. Like, are we going to see Walker? Are we going to see Emmett? I mean, it's like it keeps everybody in the balance. But I mean, at the same time, at the end of the day, you have to. Coach Ken brought up a good point. You have to have one quarterback, and the question is, who will they go on Saturday? Because both quarterbacks have had great numbers. I know Emmett Brown over 1,500 yards on the season. I mean, when was the last time we saw a quarterback that did that for San Jose State? Got to go back to David Fales all the way back in the day. And
Yeah.
I mean, look at, okay, how many, okay, he has touchdown, he has Emmett Brown has 16 touchdowns on the season. Okay, that's good. But the thing is, who is the leader in that locker room right now? Who is the guy that will lead the troops, especially when the going gets tough? Is it going to be Walker or will it be Emmett? That's the thing. You have to understand who will make the lead, who will make that decision to be the leader of this team. There's two horses in that corral right now. Who will be the stallion on Saturday? That's my thing.
Let's talk about these defenses here for a minute because, I feel like they both kind of been up and down in the way. Fresno's really stood tall there in the fourth quarter last week versus Nevada. Devo Bridges just had, and he's been a household name for years in the Fresno
Yes.
State program. Cam Lockridge as well. He's been great. I know he was out last year for significant time due to injury. But talk about some of these household names here for Fresno because I'll give Fresno State a lot of credit. I don't know what they're doing down there, but they find ways. Maybe that's just the way their program is built. But all these household names that they have, they just find ways to keep them with all this transfer portal stuff and all the moving parts that these rosters have every year. Your household names, they stay in the valley because I feel like a lot of those guys, they could very easily go to Power Four programs and have a lot of success. But you could just tell there's buy-in out there in Fresno. And Devo Bridges has been one of those guys. He gets better every year. Cam Lockridge, he's a household name in the Mountain West every single year.
And also Dean
Talk,
Clark. Yeah, you can't forget about Dean Clark. I mean,
yeah.
Dean Clark's looked really good this season. I mean, he got ejected from the game against Nevada due to targeting, so he will be ready to go in that first quarter against San Jose State.
Yeah, and give Fresno a lot of credit there. I know it's been a little bit rocky, and I feel like there's been some inconsistencies. I talked about the Spartan run defense. Yes, it was good versus Wyoming, but Wyoming has been a very offensively challenged team this year. I mean, they're for what's been a run first team, both of their running backs have been out for pretty much since week 1, and they've been rolling on third and fourth string running backs as RB1 and 2, which is definitely a plus for the defense. So I don't really know. I feel like, for the Spartan run defense, I feel like prove it. I feel like for like prove it again. And I think, for the Spartan pass defense in a way, and just collectively, they gotta avoid the penalties. Like that's been the big thing here the past 3 weeks is the penalties, like the offensive pass interferences, the DPIs, the targetings. Like I feel like there's a targeting review every single week now for San Jose State. Like there's just some of these inexcusable penalties that Coach Ken has even acknowledged in his pressers every week, and even after the game, like we got to clean that up. And this is, I feel like we're like in the third straight week now. This is going back to Nevada since conference play really started. Like, hey, we got to clean this up. If the Spartans have one of those penalty, drives where, they're in the red zone and all of a sudden it just kicks them all the way out into no man's land, they can't have that in this type of game because we know these Fresno State and San Jose State games over the years have been really weird. And like when you think the team that has the better record that's going into the game much better on paper, whatever the case may be, it seems like always the other team wins, right? I don't know. It's very weird with these games. We talked about the whole rivalry aspect, but this is the game. If you want to bring your A game, you have to bring it this week because I feel like the winner or loser of this one could have down the stretch this season, it could be very different, and I feel like the culture shock could be extra significant.
Well, I mean, also, I mean, you look at how Fresno State, like in 2022, I mean, the Bulldogs were like Jake Kaner was not even starting that night. It was Logan Fife who got the start, but it was the Bulldogs were able to find ways to get the victory. But I mean, it's just, I mean, but penalties and turnovers are always going to kill a team, especially when I do the play-by-play for a junior college in Kalinga. And that when I do our pregame interview with the head coach, he says, every time I say, what are the keys to victory? He says, penalties and turnovers. It's all through the different levels, and especially for the Bulldogs have had some silly penalties in the last couple of weeks, especially against Washington State. I mean, if both teams if they're able to clean up their messes, so to speak, with their penalties and the turnovers, it's going to be a pretty good game. It's going to be really fun to see the chess match between Coach Ken and Tim Skipper on Saturday night.
Most definitely. Brian, is there a certain unit that you're looking for, offense or defense, that you think needs to step up in this game that has the capability to and could ultimately have an impact on this game? Because, I feel like, if the Spartan offense, it's been really good this year. Like the run game is definitely starting to come along, like I said. But if they can get Nick Nash going and J Lock going, like the combination of both of those guys, I think would be pretty unstoppable. We've seen it sometimes. We know Nick Nash is going to get his 17 targets a game, that the ridiculous number. But if they can get the explosives plus the underneath stuff with Nick Nash, I feel like, Fresno State could be doing for a long day here defensively. Is there a certain unit that you're looking for on Fresno to really slow things down on that end?
You know what? I'll go defense first. I really want to see the matchup between Nick Nash and whoever we're gonna have covering him because that's probably the best matchup we're gonna see all night long. Because hopefully we're like I was talking to my good friends about this. Like hopefully Cam Lockridge will be covering Nick Nash and that'll be the show for the year. That'll be the best. That'll be the best showdown right there. Two of the best guys in the conference battling it out. If the thing is, I would say that if you have to put somebody on Nick Nash 24/7. You can't let him go wild in open country in the field because if he finds some daylight, he's gone. Or I mean, he might climb the ladder and make a tremendous grab. The thing is, for me, we have to look at that offensive line for us. Fresno State, we have to find ways to protect Mikey Keene. If we can protect Mikey Keene on Saturday, the offense will be moving the ball down the field. We've seen it in past games, and especially last season and this year, when the offensive line is healthy and looking really good, that gives Mikey Keene a lot of protection. He's able to throw the ball down the field. And he's able to pick defenses apart just like that. Plus, the running game has to work as well, and a little bit of luck against San Jose State. I mean, it's a rivalry game. You mentioned it before, Nick. Anything can happen. Even the craziness can happen. It is almost spooky season. So, I mean, expect the unexpected at Valley Children's Stadium.
And I will say this before we close things out. The special teams. Because let's not forget about that element, right? The Spartan special teams. I know Coach Ken has not been also he's not been also holly jolly about it the past pretty much all season long, quite honestly. And Colorado State was able to neutralize some stuff and have some big time returns. Able to flip the field and get some stuff in plus territory. The turnovers, obviously, that's a big element into that, like we talked about. But if I don't know if Malik Sherrod's playing in this one, but we've seen Sherrod or whoever the return man is for Fresno State, turn things up and have themselves a big time return. In some cases, even for a touchdown. I'll never forget Sherrod returning that one for Boise State before the break last year. Like Fresno State's returners are lethal, and San Jose State special teams definitely has to get after it because and that can ultimately be the turning point in this one. I know I talked about a few weeks ago about a field goal kick versus Colorado State, and how the altitude and things within that nature, and that wasn't the ultimate deciding factor to the game, but it was one of the factors. So special teams, I feel like we had a field goal block last week. Like it's just little stuff like that the Spartans cannot have because let's just be honest, Fresno State, let's give them a lot of credit. Out of Valley Children's Stadium, you guys packed the crowd,
Yeah,
and
it's a lot
it
of
is
fun.
going
A
to
lot
be
of fun.
very loud out there.
Yeah.
So I feel like, for San Jose State, they have veterans on this team. They've been to Washington State earlier in the year. It wasn't sold out, Washington State was, but this is going to be probably the most amped up Mountain West crowd that they play in this year. And they got to be ready for it. And I'm very interested to see with Walker Eget. Yeah, he's been around the block. He's been here for 4+ years. He's been in college for a long time. But last week was just his first career start. How is he going to handle the crowd noise here? And I know, veterans and quarterbacks, like they try to throw that stuff out the window, but that place is going to be sold out. It's a rivalry game. So I feel like that is an element that must be mentioned here in this conversation.
Well, also, I mean, you brought up a good point there, Nick, about special teams. Like last week, the Bulldogs were able to like put pressure on the special teams unit in Nevada. I mean, the punter had to like fall on the ball because the punt unit was rushing. It was too fast. Like the special teams unit for the Dogs rushed him, and they got the ball back like in prime territory, and they were able to cash in some of those points off those great plays by the special teams. But I mean, Valley Children's Stadium. Have you been to a game, Nick?
I
If you
have not been to a game there.
you have to go to a game. It's
I'm
not
going on Saturday.
okay. That's good. The thing is that at Valley Children's Stadium, it rocks. It will be rocking on Saturday. Plus, it is homecoming. It is homecoming here on campus. So, I mean, everybody's excited. It's the blackout. We're all the football teams wearing their black uniforms, the black helmets. It's going to be a lot of fun. Plus, with the drone show, it is they always say it's the biggest party in the Valley. And when San Jose State comes to town, it is even a bigger party in the Valley because you have everybody. Because it's one of the best rivalries in my opinion. Because we have the oil can for San Diego State, the milk can for Boise State. But when you have your closest rival just over 150 miles due west over the Pacheco Pass in the Silicon Valley, it just means more. It just means more. And I mean, I know the whole entire Red Wave will be rocking on Saturday night, especially in the dog pound at the student section. I mean, it is going to be probably one of the biggest games of the year. And I mean, we've had some big games this year. I mean, like the last home game against Washington State, really good sellout, and it was Washington State travels very well. But I mean, it's home games in the San Joaquin Valley, the tailgating, it's just perfect. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be Saturday afternoons in autumn in the San Joaquin Valley. Doesn't get even any better than Fresno State football going up against San Jose State on Saturday.
I'll tell you this much. This is gonna be my first ever game at Valley Children's Stadium. I've been to your baseball stadium. I've been to some basketball games at the Save Mart Center for broadcasting, but I will be on the air for this game this Saturday between the Spartans and the Bulldogs on 90.5 FM KSJS. My good friend Jonathan Connors will be on the call with me. Man, that is going to be electric stuff, and I most definitely can't wait for that game. We'll be calling it on the radio. Brian, I'm guessing you'll be at Fresno in some sort of fashion. But
I'll be around. I'll be around. I usually because I'm a student reporter for our news station here on campus, so I'll be around somewhere. I'll be working in the press box somewhere. So I'll come by and say hello to you, Nick.
for sure, for sure. Before we close things out, Bryan, where can people find you? I know you're doing a bunch of stuff for Fresno. I know the baseball season is not right around the corner, but it's coming. It'll be here before you know it. I know you're doing a bunch of stuff out there in Fresno. Where can people find you?
So you can go to my Instagram page, Bryan Welch 127. You can go to my Twitter page, just Bryan, just BRYANWE, and then 9945694. Well, I need to figure out the numbering on my Twitter, but I'll get it. I'll post it again. But the thing is, I broadcast a lot of my games on YouTube, so I just look up Bryan Welch, and I do the play-by-play for a couple of high schools here in the Fresno area, and I just about do the play-by-play for Kalinga High School, my alma mater, for the football season, and then do play-by-play for the junior college in Kalinga, and I do the play-by-play for Fresno State women's soccer and a water polo on the Mountain West Network. And then baseball season's right around the corner, so a little bit of Hoover High School baseball and a little bit of Fresno State. And you know what? Summertime will be around. I still need to figure out what I'm doing in the summertime. And
How about a
I'm grad.
break?
I graduate in May. I keeps me out of trouble, my friend. I keep me out of trouble. So I mean, it keeps it. It's always a busy year here in Fresno. Every sport's going on right now. I know basketball. You guys will have basketball in the next couple of weeks. I know
Yep.
Fresno will be ready to go. I know high school season will start after Thanksgiving. So it's been a grind. It's so much fun. It's so much fun being here in the Valley.
Man, that is great stuff. I know you're killing it out there in Fresno.
You're my friend.
Um, so just some housekeeping stuff on my end. Just came back from Mountain West Media Days. We'll be uploading all of the interviews on YouTube. We talked to head coach San Jose State men's basketball head coach Tim Miles. All of the women's basketball interviews are available on YouTube. Just an overall great experience out there in Las Vegas. Man, some great personalities with the head coaches and players. So we'll definitely get that up there so you could check all that stuff out on the YouTube channel. Once again, I am your host, Nick Urias, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.